Have you ever seen that perfect couple? That couple that you just go, I want to be like that, or that they just have it all put together. Well, today we're going to see what that's all about. I got on the couch with me. You're smiling already. I know, I'm just setting you up. Pat and Alva together, you guys have been for 53, next week, 53 years of marriage. I'm super excited about talking with you guys on how do you make that happen. I mean, how with the divorce rate that we have going on in this country, to so many different obstacles and challenges, you guys are doing it. And I love that. And I'm inspired by that. And I'm hoping the people that are watching today will be inspired as well. So just tell me a little bit. We'll jump in, okay, on, first of all, how'd you meet?
At church.
At church.
Yeah, it was just a little tiny Baptist church that was a block from my nursing dorm. And
it's where the Frank Irwin Center is right now at 16th and Red River.
Okay.
I was at UT. Pat was at nursing school. Small, friendly church. They had covered dish supper every Wednesday night.
They had what?
Covered dish supper every Wednesday night.
Okay.
For a guy in summer school, that helped out.
That is awesome. So it was a...
But I have to tell you, when he walked in, I said, oh no, he's too handsome and too smart for me.
Oh, is that right?
That's exactly what I said.
You said too handsome, too smart for me,
yes.
While you're going to nursing school.
Yes.
Okay.
And so he had to drop out because he had to help his dad with his mom. She had breast cancer. And so when he came back, I suddenly thought, he's not too smart for me.
That is awesome. So here's the thing. So you guys, I mean, you catch each other across a room, and this was what,
66?
60 something. Okay,
66.
so you're living in the 60s.
Right.
All right. And you're at a little Baptist church.
And when we went out one night after church to get a Dairy Queen social, she slid across the seat to me, and I slid right close to her, and she scooted away very fast.
Wait, hold on. So was this the first time you guys went out together? You slide in there?
Well,
hey.
we have a guy who's our best man at their wedding later on.
He took all of the...
He took a gang of us.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
so it wasn't a first date thing, but it was for you it was.
No, it wasn't a first date at all. I was just teasing with him, and he scared me to death. So I scooted back.
So when did you know, man? I mean, tell me when you, obviously maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, when you walked into that church and you caught her eye, you caught his eye, he's handsome, all that. When was it you were like, I want to marry her, or I want to marry him?
Well, there were some dates. I sent her an anonymous bouquet of roses and used a pseudonym, and so she thought maybe an intern at the hospital had sent him. He took credit for it.
He did.
So you playing games?
I played games. I gave her a stack of newspapers and I wrapped a Valentine's heart of candy in it, and I gave her a Russian alphabet that deciphered my fake name of the previous 6 months ago.
And this is October to February.
I don't know how to respond to that. That would have never worked for me. She would have been gone.
During the Super Bowl weekend, she had a color TV in her dorm. So there were incentives there.
What can you say?
I don't even know how to respond to that. So you were really pursuing her for her color television is what I'm hearing here.
When you look at your parents' marriage and see the positives of them and the struggles they had, I remember as a child, my dad was chronic ulcer pains out of the military. He had roughneck work in the oil field industry of East Texas. And there was a time that he took to drinking alcohol for a while, and things got a little rough and crabby and around the house, a lot of stress. And we started attending a little church nearby. Things changed. And that changed. My mom became a Sunday school director of a church later in Dallas. There are always things like this. My dad worked there also. So I grew up in the church. Now, my wife has a different story of growing up. Her mom dropped her off. Mm-hmm. But we were brought together in Austin by a church, Harris Memorial Baptist Church, and a small group of people, friendly, and we had a great pastor.
Yep.
And we talked a lot about the principles of what makes a lasting commitment, agape love. So in our early dating, we would sit and just talk. What do you want in a relationship? What are the foundations? And one of those is commitment. That if you have, we were saying, if we have a relationship and it should be a journey and a commitment, if you get Alzheimer's, I still love you. Bad health, if I get it, I expect the same. We have that commitment.
Yeah, you've made a commitment. And that comes from, I'm guessing, and you just kind of
God's
brought that
commitment
up.
to us.
Yeah, one, God's commitment to you, and the foundation you were brought up in.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you just said it. You started out, Dad's alcohol, church came along. That became a foundation in your life, right? And you said you had a different story growing up, but it was church.
My parents divorced when I was 5.
Okay.
And then my mom remarried, and both marriages were volatile. They both drank. They were both tempers, that sort of thing. But it's amazing to me that God used all of that. It seemed like when people put negative toward me, I wanted to see how I could change it to positive. I remember in sociology class in college, this guy said, how many of you come from divorced families? So, you know, about half of us raised our hands. And he said, well, I just want you to know that most of you are not going to have good marriages. And I remember sitting there thinking, that doesn't have to be that way. It depends on who you're relying on.
So
And-
true.
yeah.
And so different foundations, different type
Right.
of thinking, but you come together, you get married,
67.
1967, married, all right, and starting your home. And you're longtime members here at Bannockburn, you know, how long?
85.
1985, so okay, a lot of different, you know, things going on. I mean, kids happening, careers are going, you know, just walk me through a little bit of the early years, because that's what they say, right, in marriages. The hardest years are the first, second year of marriage, right in there when you're figuring things out. You know, what did y'all do? What was it that maybe the key that you guys kind of held on to that first couple years?
I think the fact that we did come from a small church and there were so few people, we all relied on each other. I mean, the WMU at the small church did our reception. Some of them did the flowers. Some of them did the cake. So we had that church support. And I think that helped us tremendously, because when one of our children had a heart problem, then we could call somebody and just ask for prayer. We could ask for support, and they were there for us. And that just seemed to be what it was, just the support of friends and other members.
And that support in a church setting, we had a new teacher who had a late class. Everybody got in late. So he had to start over. And so he said, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to ask people to tell God's involvement in their lives. And we saw people who had sexual predators in their families, alcoholism, all kinds of things. They were not just people who came to church, they were people who had real issues in life. And the community of support, you got there on time just to hear that life story. If you didn't make it, you didn't know the depth of commitment and fellowship and support that we gave each other. And that community of support has always been there for church.
So community is
That
a
and-
very
yeah.
big part of that.
Right, and strong. We tended to be led to strong Sunday school rooms, Bible study, and I think those things really helped too, because when I was growing up, I learned the stories, but I didn't really learn principles. Then when we got to Harris, we had a pastor who was teaching the principles, and that made such a difference. And then Alva, I think when we really grew is when we went to youth.
Institute of Basic Youth Conflicts, and they talk about application. It was a whole week of 3 hours a night, all day Friday, all day Saturday, and just being under authority, how God intervenes in your life, irritations you have in a marriage relationship.
Oh, never, right?
Talk about a perfect marriage. We read the Proverbs, Perfect Woman, and a class member said, how boring if we were married to the perfect person. And it's the spice of life to walk on the journey together.
Yep.
Yeah. Very good. So what advice, would you give okay, to a young couple. I mean, 53 years of marriage, there's a lot of wisdom here, and this is why we're sitting down today. This is why I'm so excited about having you guys on the couch, is that 53 years of marriage is absolutely amazing, especially nowadays.
Right.
I'd like to walk through this a little bit. What advice would you give to a newlywed, a wife, that new wife, or maybe that new mother? What kind of advice would you give to be that? And again, I joke around saying perfect, but that supportive.
Yeah, we always say we
wife.
don't have a perfect marriage; we have a great marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's something that Mrs. Abington said when she and Jim were doing a marriage thing here, and he gave the biblical and she gave the practical. But she ended her talk by saying, "Just be kind." And so a lot of times that's always in the back of my mind. God wants us to be kind, not just to other people, but to our spouses. We can rub each other wrong so easily, but if you just have kindness in there and you remember that, then that helps a lot.
That's such a good word, being kind, to
And
each other, even during the irritations.
Right.
Which is hard.
Right.
No one's saying it's easy.
Right.
I don't think anybody ever said this was going to be easy. And 20 years ago when my wife and I got married, no one said, "Oh, that's going to be so great. It's going to be easy." No, we've had some stuff. But wow, what a great word though, just being kind.
And I think another thing too is how we talk about our spouses outside our home.
Bingo.
I remember playing canasta with my mom and her two friends, and all they did was just talk about how terrible their husbands were, and I knew they loved them. And I sat there and I thought, again, I'm never going to do that.
That is so good.
And that really made an impact on me, because for one thing, things change in your life, and then this person has a terrible view of your husband and what you're going through, and you're just as happy as can be, and they're still carrying it.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I tell young people that you only go to people who can help your problem. You don't just throw it out there.
Very good, yeah. Same question to a young man who is just married, trying to do it right, trying to figure it out, maybe a new father. What would you say?
Some of the boot camps for marriage that we've attended, and they're beneficial. They jar your memory. They principles that you used to walk in and observe and got lazy on. Listen to your wife and repeat back what she said, and don't solve the problem. Just listen to the communication, how she felt, what changes she might request, and if that happened, how it would make her feel. But guys want to jump in and fix the problem, so we say, we've covered that before in chapter 5 back here, check the manual.
Check the manual.
And but you're walking with this person for a lifetime of intimacy. And intimacy is an expectation that that person develops in all they can be. And how can you contribute to that? And if you don't encourage the growth of your spouse, you're doing yourself a disservice. Ephesians 5, when he talks to the husband in the household, he's supposed to be a good man that loves God first and understands being under God's authority, and he's to mirror that in his relationship. So there's lots of commitments. Don't make one seminar says God does not make junk. Whoever he gives us, God deals with a plan for people's lives. And how we approach that is looking for those check marks along the way. Irritations we talked about. I currently have a messy desk. And we encountered the story of a man whose wife wanted to clean up and invite people over to her house, but her husband's coffee table was always a mess. Then she thought, how do I transform that irritation to something positive?
Right.
He's working to support us. He works hard. The noise of the kids, of rattling clothes hangers when they were all metal before we got plastic, and made such a noise to the kids, couldn't put them away. He said, well, I'm going to transfer that to the kids' happiness and their joys and the life and the vitality they have. So transform irritations into positives.
Finding the happiness in it.
Finding
the joy in it.
Right.
Even the irritations. Yeah. So let's go there. Let's talk a little bit about 53 years of marriage. I'm sure there's been conflict. How do you deal with the conflict, the irritations, besides making them joy? Because, I mean, you are going to kind of have those days where, hey, we don't see eye to eye.
Well, the first year we were married, I truly thought he was perfect. I'm serious. And that was very hard on me because I knew I wasn't. And it was very hard for me to think that someone really could love me. And then I started seeing him procrastinate. So that's been our little irritation. And so we've had some conflicts there. And some of the ways I handle it is like this morning, I was ready before him. So I was able to tidy up the house a little bit. I was able to read a little bit. And so what I try to do is just shift my energy when I have a conflict there. And then, as he said, I went on vacation without him one time because I told him when we needed to leave, and it had been going on. And so I thought, well, okay.
I had to call the kid and say, Mom's not here. I think she went on vacation without me. Have you seen her?
They said, good for her.
And she called me 2 hours later and said, I'm here. If you want to drive down, I'll give you a certain amount of time to get here.
Okay, hold on. I got to unpack this.
Yeah, okay. Yes, go ahead.
Let's unpack this for a second. Because you mentioned it. You're ready probably more than he is.
I am.
So one day, y'all are going on vacation.
Yep.
You're ready to go.
You got it.
He's not there.
There you go.
And so you just decided to get in the car and go, you know what? I'm going.
Yep.
A couple hours later,
because
you're
I
like,
had said, in 30 minutes, honey, that was the time we decided on. And so I did. And then when I was in Fredericksburg, I called him, and we left one car at Walmart, and then we took off. But it was
So you did go. You called back up.
Oh, yeah.
She gave me time to catch up.
But
it was a time limit, though.
You better be here at this time, or I'm definitely going without you.
You got it. But what that did is it cleared the air of a problem that we had been having for a long time. And so we came to the conclusion that we would say, we're going to get in the car at such and such time. And then I'm not constantly saying, honey, are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready?
Yeah.
And I'm an early person, and he's not. I want things done yesterday, and he's looking at how he can do it tomorrow because he's a thinker.
But you've learned.
You've
learned how to deal, because everybody's going to have their
Right.
own imperfections.
Right. And you need timeouts.
You learn. You either go on vacation by yourself, or you just really learn how to deal with those things, right? You learn how to adapt and how to cope and how to, because you love each other.
Right.
And when you make that vow and saying, hey, listen, better or worse, I mean, the better part, the better part's great and it's easy.
Right.
But it's getting to that worst part,
One of the things you learn by looking at the negatives. Don't dance on the other person's hot buttons.
Yeah.
You know the things that make them upset, irritable, and if you have a little bit of a mean streak in you, it's not going to profit you. If you're going to, you have to make a conscious decision. I'm going to cherish that person.
Right.
God cherishes me. He's that love relationship. You can always fall back on that. But I want to make this a journey. It's hard to break in a new car. It's hard to break in lots of things. You don't want to break in a new spouse. You're going to relive the same problems you haven't dealt with before.
Right.
So make the adjustments now and walk in the joy. We've had health problems with our kids. We've adoption that it took a while for our son to come back to God. Other stories that are just family privacy, but we've had experiences that could have pushed us apart. But she's the one, my partner. She's the one I want to walk through life with. The team challenge in the Tour de France was where the fifth rider crossing the line out of a team of 8 was buoyed up by his partners, and they drafted ahead of him. They let him catch up and trail. Marriage is crossing when the partner gets across the finish line. You don't run ahead. You tandem. Take them with you.
Yeah.
Strength to strength. Pull.
Together. About being together.
Yeah.
Would there be anything that you would do over? Or you're saying, no, because what we did is who we are, or, I know that's a tough question. It's just like
Yeah, I'm
looking
thinking.
back. Oh, I know, 53 years. You're like, I don't know, 53 years. What are you talking about? Let me try to explain that a little bit better. Would it be anything that you would look back at and say, I would have done that differently if, after a while looking back at it? Or even maybe saying, no, I wouldn't do it differently because that, again, has made us who we are today.
As you're asking that, that's what I'm thinking. It's that every experience we've gone through has helped us grow.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to throw out just for a second is that when we had a really hard time with one of our children, we left the hospital, and it was Wednesday night, and I said, Avi, can we still go on to choir, because that's a place where it's joyous. And we were singing, When Answers Aren't Enough, There Is Jesus. Oh. And that's been kind of what's pulled us together, is the fact that no matter what we've gone through and the conflicts and the stress and so on, we've had him. Plus, this man never gets angry at me, and I can actually say that. And when I ask him if he could change something, he's willing to try. And that makes such a difference. So I can't say that I would change anything.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Getting angry with your spouse is non-productive.
Doesn't work.
Happy wife, happy life is the advice I've heard, and
yes,
I endorse completely.
One more question, because this is just fascinating.
Right.
And I love it. Was there ever a time in 53 years where you thought you weren't going to make it and God intervened? Maybe where God came in and maybe showed y'all something differently, separately, or showed you something, maybe early on or whatever. Just, something where you're going, I don't know.
Well, I have to tell this. Then.
Okay.
So when we had a lot of trouble with our teenagers. They were just so rebellious. They are all back. We're all good friends, and it's really neat to have adult children. But during that time, it was really stressful, and so we were more stressful with our relationship. And there was a time I thought, do I want to keep doing this? And then I remembered that God said, if you remembered, you prayed for this man before you knew him. And I can remember being in nursing school in my bed, and I said, God, I want to tell you what I want in a husband. I want a blue-eyed blonde, which was stupid because I always liked dark-haired guys. But I want a blue-eyed blonde. I want big shoulders, and I want 6'4". He's 5'10", but he's easier to kiss. But I want a growing Christian, preferably Baptist, because it makes it easier. And someone who doesn't cuss, doesn't smoke, doesn't drink, because I've been there in my family and I don't want to go back. And he reminded me of that prayer again. And so you can't throw back God's gift. So you work at it.
Yeah.
You work at it.
I wanted a person to cherish, and I got that in Pat. But your question about do-overs with God struck a note. God puts us in our own boot camp, intervening in those things he wants to strengthen, things that he wants to change. And to get a different do-over, you got a different set of problems. He might polish something else. It doesn't say it gets better without God, that we're not going to make the same mistakes. So have the confidence to walk with him. God does the makeover. It's not a do-over on our part. He is transforming us.
Right.
And by his own example of being the servant spirit that left heaven, left up everything he could ask for and say, I've come to pay the penalty. I've come to reconcile mankind to God. I've come to love him and show that God loves him. And with that type of spirit in our lives, it's a positive, what else would you want? That the God of creation wants to intervene personally in your relationship.
Right.
So lean into that. Lean into it.
It's the cord of three strands.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we talked about that before we ever got married. We always say that our marriage, the strength of our marriage started before we got married.
Yeah.
Because we did talk through it, but again, it was that support of the church, the things that we learned by watching other marriages and how well they were doing. All those things make you who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
well, thank you guys for your example. Thank
Oh, you're
you.
sweet.
It is, and it's an example, and it's inspiring to see.
We all have examples.
We all have
Exactly.
stories.
We all have stories. We all have examples. But thank you for
Thank
being
you.
that example, and thank you for being that inspiration for married couples to say, you know what, we can do this with God.
You can.
With His strength, that quarter three strands again. There's us.
Yeah.
There's but when we wrap Him in between that,
Right.
and we can't be broken.
Right.
And that's so good to hang on to.
And if you get in a growth group, you find that community of
Right.
that support. And
Why our life groups are so important.
Right.
Why
They are.
we preach our life groups here at Bannockburn
Absolutely.
to say, get involved,
Right.
so you can have other people, and that makes you even stronger.
Right.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us.
you.
I hope you guys had a great time today. We love you, and we'll see you next time at Bannockburn Stories.